Hello and welcome. We are LADS, Loughton Amateur Dramatic Society, and we're so pleased you're joining us on our walk on the wild side. We'll be taking you on a literary journey featuring poems, prose and dramatised extracts from writers of days gone by. We begin with observations of the natural world, celebrating the beauty and mystery of wildlife. Then we feature animals taking on human characteristics, animals as a reflection of man. Next, we enter the realms of complete fantasy with depictions of creatures born in man's imagination. And finally, we return to our own backyard with a walk through Epping Forest itself. So sit back, relax, and off we go. Our journey begins at dawn with an extract from The Hours of Spring by the Victorian author and naturalist Richard Jefferies. Jefferies combines his senses and mind to filter the sounds, colours and odours of early spring into a river of deep feeling. Nature seems to possess the power of communication, speaking to him of some hidden meaning that is present everywhere. The Tiger, by William Blake, 18th century poet and painter, is a vivid, mystical, quasi-religious reflection on the wonders of creation. Snake, D.H. Lawrence's narrative poem of the 1920s, contrasts the nobility and beauty of the much-maligned snake with the prejudices and fear of the over-educated human who encounters him.
It is sweet on awaking in the early morning to listen to the small bird singing on the tree. No sound of voice or flute is like to the bird's song. There is something in it distinct and separate from all other notes. The throat of woman gives forth a more perfect music, and the organ is the glory of man's soul. The bird upon the tree utters the meaning of the wind, a voice of the grass and wildflower, words of the green leaf. They speak through that slender tone. Sweetness of dew and rifts of sunshine, the dark hawthorn touched with breaths of open bud, the odour of the air, the colour of the daffodil. All that is delicious and beloved of springtime are expressed in his song. Genius is nature, and his lay, like the sap in the bough from which he sings, rises without thought. Nor is it necessary that it should be a song. A few short notes in the sharp spring morning are sufficient to stir the heart. But yesterday, the least of them all came to a bow by my window, and in his call I heard the sweet briar wind rushing over the young grass. Refulgent fall the golden rays of the sun. A minute only, the clouds cover him, and the hedge is dark. The bloom of the gorse is shut like a book, but it is there. A few hours of warmth, and the covers will fall open. The meadow is bare, but in a little while the heart-shaped celandine leaves will come in their accustomed place. On the pollard willows, the long wands are yellow-ruddy in the passing gleam of sunshine. The first colour of spring appears in their bark. The delicious wind rushes among them and they bow and rise. It touches the top of the dark pine that looks in the sun the same now as in summer. It lifts and swings the arching trail of bramble. It dries and crumbles the earth in its fingers. The hedge sparrow's feathers are fluttered as he sings on the bush. Today, through the window pane, I see a lark high up against the grey cloud and hear his song. I cannot walk about and arrange with the buds and gorse bloom. How does he know it is the time for him to sing? Without my book and pencil and observing eye, how does he understand that the hour has come? To sing high in the air, to chase his mate over the low stone wall of the ploughed field, to battle with his high-crested rival, to balance himself on his trembling wings, outspread a few yards above the earth, and utter that sweet little loving kiss, as it were, of song. Oh, happy, happy days. So beautiful to watch as if he were my own, and I felt it all. Without me to tell him, how does this lark today that I hear through the window know it is his hour?
Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hands and what dread feet? What the hammer? What the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil? What dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry?
A snake came to my water trough on a hot, hot day, and I, in pyjamas for the heat, to drink there. In the deep, strange-scented shade of the great dark carob tree, I came down the steps with my pitcher, and must wait, must stand and wait, for there he was at the trough before me. He reached down from a fissure in the earth wall in the gloom, and trailed his yellow-brown slackness, soft-bellied down, over the edge of the stone trough. And where the water had dripped from the tap, in a small clearness, he sipped with his straight mouth, softly drank through his straight gums, into his slack, long body, silently. Someone was before me at my water trough, and I, like a second comer, waiting. He lifted his head from his drinking, as cattle do, and looked at me vaguely, as drinking cattle do, and flickered his two-forked tongue from his lips, and mused a moment, and stooped, and drank a little more. Being earth-brown, earth-golden from the burning bowels of the earth, on the day of Sicilian July, with Etna smoking, the voice of my education said to me, he must be killed. For in Sicily, the black snakes are innocent, the gold are venomous. And voices in me said, if you were a man, you would take a stick and break him now and finish him off. But must I confess how I liked him? How glad I was he had come like a guest in quiet to drink at my water trough, and depart, peaceful, pacified, and thankless, into the burning bowels of this earth. Was it cowardice that I dared not kill him? Was it perversity that I longed to talk to him? Was it humility to feel so honoured? I felt so honoured. And yet those voices, if you were not afraid, you would kill him. And truly, I was afraid. I was most afraid. But even so, honoured still more, that he should seek my hospitality from out of the dark door of the secret earth. He drank enough, and lifted his head dreamily, as one who has drunken, and flickered his tongue like a forked knight on the air, so black, seeming to lick his lips, and looked around like a god, unseeing into the air, and slowly turned his head, and slowly, very slowly, as if thrice a dream, proceeded to draw his slow length, curving round, and climb again the broken bank of my wall face. And as he put his head into that dreadful hole, as he slowly drew up, snake easing his shoulders, and entered farther, a sort of horror, a sort of protest against his withdrawing into that horrid black hole, deliberately going into the blackness, and slowly drawing himself after, overcame me now his back was turned. I looked around. I put down my pitcher. I picked up a clumsy log and threw it at the water trough with a clatter. I think it did not hit him. But suddenly, that part of him that was left behind convulsed in undignified haste, writhed like lightning, and was gone. Into the black hole, the earth-lipped fissure in the wall front, at which, in the intense still noon, I stared with fascination. And immediately, I regretted it. I thought, how paltry, how vulgar, what a mean act. I despised myself and the voices of my accursed human education, and I thought of the albatross, and I wished he would come back, my snake. For he seemed to me again like a king in exile, uncrowned in the underworld, now due to be crowned again. And so I missed my chance with one of the lords of life. And I have something to expiate. A pettiness.
And now we journey across the sea to America. Moby Dick is considered one of the greatest American novels. Captain Ahab, whose obsession brings him to madness, is determined to find and kill the great white whale that caused him to lose his leg. In this extract, towards the end of the novel, Moby Dick is spotted for the first time. White Fang was written by Jack London in 1906. The story follows a wild wolf dog as he navigates the chaotic world of human life in 1800s America, with the Yukon Territory and the Klondike Gold Rush set as its background. Our final American extract is taken from Twain's Adventures of Tom Sawyer and depicts Tom's wonder at the tiniest creatures of the natural world.
That night, in the midwatch, The old man suddenly thrust out his face fiercely, sniffing up the sea air as a sagacious ship's dog will. He declared that a whale must be near. Soon that peculiar odour, sometimes given forth by the living sperm whale, was palpable to all the watch. Nor was any mariner surprised when, after inspecting the compass, and then the dog vane to ascertain the precise bearing of the odour as nearly as possible, Ahab rapidly ordered the ship's course to be slightly altered and the sail to be shortened. The acute policy dictating these movements was sufficiently vindicated at daybreak by the sight of a long sleek on the sea directly and lengthwise ahead, smooth as oil, and resembling in the pleated watery wrinkles bordering it the polished metallic-like marks of some swift tide rip at the mouth of a deep, rapid stream.
"Man the mastheads! What do you see?"
cried Ahab, flattening his face to the sky.
Nothing, sir,"
was the sound reply.
"The gallant sails, studding sails, alow and aloft and on both sides."
All sail being set, he now cast loose the lifeline, reserved for swaying him to the main royal masthead, and in a few moments they were hoisting him upward, when 2/3 of the way aloft, and while peering ahead through the horizontal vacancy between the main topsail and top gallant sail, he raised a gull-like cry in the air.
"There she blows! There she blows, a hump like a snow hill! It's Moby Dick!"
Fired by the cry, which was also taken up by the 3 lookouts, the men on deck rushed to the rigging to behold the famous whale they had so long been pursuing. Ahab had now gained his final perch, some feet above the other lookouts, Tashtego standing just beneath him on the cap of the top gallant mast, so that the Indian's head was almost on a level with Ahab's heel. From this height, the whale was now seen some mile or so ahead, at every roll of the sea revealing his high, sparkling hump, and regularly jetting his silent spout into the air. To the credulous mariners it seemed the same silent spout they had so long ago beheld in the moonlit Atlantic and Indian Oceans.
"And did none of you see it before?"
cried Ahab, hailing the perched men all around him.
"I saw him almost that same instant, sir. That Captain Ahab did, and I cried out,"
said Tashtego.
"Not the same instant. None of ye could have raised the white whale first. There she blows! There she blows! There again!"
he cried in long-drawn, lingering, methodic tones, in time to the whale's visible jets.
"He's going to sound! Stand by the boats, Mr. Starbuck. Remember, stay on board, and keep the ship steady. Steady, man, steady, stand by! Stand by! Lower me! Mr. Starbuck, lower! Lower, quicker! He's heading straight leeward, sir. Right away from us. Cannot have seen the ship yet."
Soon all the boats but Starbuck's were dropped, all the boat sails set, all the paddles plying with rippling swiftness, shooting to leeward, and Ahab heading the onset. They sped through the sea, but only slowly they neared the foe. As they did so, the ocean grew still more smooth, and seemed to draw a carpet over its waves, so serenely did it spread. At length the breathless hunter came so nigh his seemingly unsuspecting prey, that his entire dazzling hump was distinctly visible, sliding along the sea as if an isolated thing, and continually set in a revolving ring of finest, fleecy, greenish foam. Before it, far out on the soft waters, went the glistening white shadow from his broad, milky forehead, a musical rippling playfully accompanying the shade, and behind, the blue waters interchangeably flowed over into the moving valley of his steady wake, and on either hand bright bubbles arose and danced by his side.
The cub came upon them suddenly. It was his own fault. He had been careless. He left the cave and ran down to the stream to drink.
It might have been that he took no notice because he was heavy with sleep, and his carelessness might have been due to the familiarity of the trail to the pool. He had travelled it often, and nothing had ever happened before. He went down past the blasted pine, crossed the open space, and trotted in amongst the trees. Then at the same instant he saw and smelt. Before him, sitting silently on their haunches, were 5 live things, the like of which he had never seen before. But at the sight of him, the 5 men did not spring to their feet, nor show their teeth, nor snarl. They did not move, but sat there, silent and ominous. Nor did the cub move. Every instinct of his nature would have impelled him to dash wildly away, had there not suddenly arisen within him another instinct. A great awe descended on him. He was overwhelmed by his own sense of weakness and littleness. Here was mastery and power, something far and away beyond him. The cub had never seen man, yet deep within him was the knowledge of his ancestors, the eyes that had circled in the darkness around countless winter campfires and peered from safe distances at the strange 2-legged animal that was lord over living things. Had he been full grown, he would have run away. As it was, he cowered down in a paralysis of fear, already half offering the surrender that his kind had made from the first time a wolf came in to sit by man's fire and be made warm. One of the men arose and walked over to him and stooped above him. The cub cowered closer to the ground. It was the unknown revealed at last in flesh and blood, bending over him and reaching down to seize hold of him. His hair bristled involuntarily. His lips writhed back and his little fangs were bared. The hand poised like doom above him hesitated, and the man spoke laughing. Wabam, wabiska, ip pit ta. Look, the white fangs. The other men laughed loudly and urged the man on to pick up the cub. As the hand descended closer and closer, he experienced 2 great impulses, to yield and to fight. The resulting action was a compromise. He did both. He yielded till the hand almost touched him. Then he fought, his teeth flashing in a snap that sank them into the hand. The next moment he received a clout alongside the head that knocked him over on his side. Then all fight fled out of him. His puppyhood and the instinct of submission took charge of him. He sat up on his haunches and howled. The 4 men laughed more loudly, while even the man who had been bitten began to laugh. They surrounded the cub and laughed at him, while he wailed out of his terror and hurt. In the midst of it, he heard something. The men heard it too, but the cub knew what it was, and with a last long wail that had in it more of triumph than grief, he ceased his noise and waited for the coming of his mother, of his ferocious mother, who fought all things and was never afraid. She was snarling as she ran. She had heard the cry of her cub and was dashing to save him.
When Tom awoke in the morning, he wondered where he was. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and looked around. Then he comprehended. It was the cool grey dawn, and there was a delicious sense of repose and peace in the deep pervading calm and silence of the woods. Not a leaf stirred, not a sound obtruded upon great nature's meditation. Beaded dewdrops stood upon the leaves and grasses. A white layer of ash covered the fire, and a thin blue breath of smoke rose straight into the air. Job and Huck still slept. Now, far away in the woods, a bird called. Another answered. Presently, the hammering of a woodpecker was heard. Gradually, the cool, dim gray of the morning whitened, and as gradually, sounds multiplied and life manifested itself. The marvel of nature, shaking off sleep and going to work, unfolded itself to the musing boy. A little green worm came crawling over a dewy leaf, lifting 2/3 of his body into the air from time to time and sniffing around, then proceeding again. For he was measuring, Tom said. And when the worm approached him, of its own accord, he sat, as still as a stone, with his hopes rising and falling by turns, as the creature still came toward him or seemed inclined to go elsewhere. And when, at last, it considered a painful moment with its curved body in the air, and then came decisively down upon Tom's leg and began a journey over him, his whole heart was glad. For that meant that he was going to have a new suit of clothes, without the shadow of a doubt, a gaudy, piratical uniform. Now, a procession of ants appeared, from nowhere in particular, and went about their labors. One struggled manfully by with a dead spider 5 times as big as itself in its arms, and lugged it straight up a tree trunk. A brown spotted ladybug climbed the dizzy height of a grass blade, and Tom bent down close to it and said, "Ladybug, ladybug, fly away home! Your house is on fire, your children's alone!" And she took wing and went off to see about it, which did not surprise the boy, for he knew of old that this insect was credulous about conflagrations, and he had practiced upon its simplicity more than once. A tumblebug came next, heaving sturdily at its bow, and Tom touched the creature to see it shut its legs against its body and pretend to be dead. The birds were fairly rioting by this time. A catbird, the northern mocker, lit in a tree over Tom's head and trilled out her imitations of her neighbors in a rapture of enjoyment. Then a shrill jay swept down, a flash of blue flame, and stopped on a twig, almost within the boy's reach, cocked his head to one side, and eyed the strangers with a consuming curiosity. A gray squirrel and a big fellow, the fox kind, came scurrying along, sitting up at intervals to inspect and chatter at the boys. For the wild things had probably never seen a human being before, and scarcely knew whether to be afraid or not. All nature was wide awake and stirring now. Long lances of sunlight pierced down through the dense foliage far and near, and a few butterflies came fluttering upon the scene.
The law of the jungle is usually taken to mean survival of the fittest. The phrase was first introduced in Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, and in Chapter 2 of his sequel, The Second Jungle Book, he describes in poetical form a detailed set of strict legal codes governing the behaviour of wolves in a pack. Our second jungle-themed reading comes from Mark Twain and features in his Book of Animals. Here, Twain imagines what the beasts of the jungle think about the morality of the strangest creature of all, man. Most of you will have heard of Edward Lear's The Owl and the Pussycat, but less well known is his poem about another unlikely pair, the duck and the kangaroo.
Now, this is the law of the jungle, as old and as true as the sky. And the wolf that shall keep it may prosper, but the wolf that shall break it must die. As the creeper that girdles the tree trunk, the law runneth forward and back. For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. Wash daily, from nose tip to tail tip. Drink deeply, but never too deep. And remember, the night is for hunting, and forget not the day is for sleep. The jackal may follow the tiger, but cub, when thy whiskers are grown, remember the wolf is a hunter. Go forth and get food of thy own. Keep peace with the lords of the jungle, the tiger, the panther and bear, and trouble not Hathi the silent, and mock not the boar in his lair. When pack meets with pack in the jungle, and neither will go from the trail, lie down till the leaders have spoken. It may be fair words shall prevail. When ye fight with the wolf of the pack, ye must fight him alone and afar, lest others take part in the quarrel, and the pack be diminished by war. The lair of the wolf is his refuge, and where he has made him his home, not even the head wolf may enter, not even the council may come. The lair of the wolf is his refuge, but where he has digged it too plain, the council shall send him a message, and so he shall change it again. If ye kill before midnight, be silent, and wake not the woods with your bay, lest ye frighten the deer from the crops, and your brothers go empty away. Ye may kill for yourselves, and your mates, and your cubs as they need, and ye can, but kill not for pleasure of killing, and 7 times never kill man. If ye plunder his kill from a weaker, devour not all in thy pride. Pack right is the right of the meanest, so go leave him the head and the hide. The kill of the pack is the meat of the pack. Ye must eat it where it lies, and no one may carry away of that meat to his lair, or he dies. The kill of the wolf is the meat of the wolf. He may do what he will, but till he has given permission, the pack may not eat of that kill. Cub right is the right of the yearling. From all the pack he may claim full gorge when the killer has eaten, and none may refuse him the same. Lair right is the right of the mother. From all of her years she may claim 1 haunch for each kill for her litter, and none may deny the same. Cave right is the right of the father, to hunt by himself for his own. He is freed of all calls to the pack. He is judged by the council alone. because of his age and his cunning, because of his gripe and his paw. In all the law leaveth open, the word of your head wolf is law. Now these are the laws of the jungle, and many and mighty are they. But the head and the hoof of the law, and the haunch and the hump is obey.
It was in the jungle. The fox had returned from his travels, and this great assemblage had gathered from the mountains and the plains to hear the wonders he was going to tell about the strange countries he had seen and the wide oceans he had crossed. As he walked slowly up and down the grassy space reserved for him, turning his subject over in his mind and arranging his thoughts, he was the centre and focus of an absorbing interest. All eyes followed him back and forth, and the light of admiration was in them, and in some a frank glint of envy. It was not to be denied that contact with the great world had had a gracious and elevating effect upon him. His carriage was graceful, polished and elegant beyond anything that had been seen in the backwoods before. His manners were dignified, easy and full of distinction. His speech was flowing and unembarrassed, and his foreign accent, so far from marring it, added a delicate charm. It was a fine audience. In front, in the place of honour, was the king, the elephant. To his right and left, all around the front row, sat the nobility, the great beasts of prey. Back of these, row after row, disposed according to rank and order of precedence, were the other creatures. In front of the king stood the royal chaplain, the marabout, on one leg and with his eyes closed in meditation. After a time, Reynard opened his portfolios and got out his collection of pictures, and was now ready to begin. The marabout asked a blessing. Then the king said to Reynard, "Begin." The first picture represented a soldier with a gun, a missionary following him with a book. It was passed around, and all examined it with interest. "What are these things?" the king inquired. "Creatures?" "Yes, your majesty." "What kind? How are they called?" "Sometimes men, sometimes Christians. It is all the same." "What are they made of?" "Flesh and bones, like your majesty's subjects." The tiger reached for the picture and examined it again with a new interest. "They look good, these Christians," he said, licking his lips. "Are they good?" "Better than any other of God's creatures, my lord. It is their constant boast. It is a cold day when they forget to give themselves that praise." The tiger licked his lips again, exhibiting much excitement, and said, "I would God I had one." The lion said, "That is my thought, brother." The gorilla, leaning upon his staff, examined the picture thoughtfully, his great lips retiring from his tushies and exposing a fellowship smile which some of the smaller animals trembled at and wished they were at home. "They go upright, like me," he said. "Is it so?" "They do, my lord." "Is it feathers they are covered with, or fur?" inquired the rhinoceros. "Neither, your grace. It is an artificial material called clothing. They make it themselves out of various stuffs, and they can take it off when they want to. Their natural covering is fish skin." Everybody was astonished and said, "It doesn't belong to them. They can take it off. They don't have to put it on, and yet they do." And the gorilla said, impressively, "Well, I'll be damned." The marabout lifted his skinny lids and gave him a crushing look, and he apologized. A hairless dog remarked, "One perceives that they live in a cold country. That is why they put it on." "No," observed Reynard. "They put it on in the hottest countries just the same." "Why, that is silly," said many voices. "Why do they afflict themselves in that way?" "Because they are ashamed to be seen naked." There was a blank look on all the faces. They could not understand this. Then they all began to laugh, and several said, "Since they can take these things off when they want to, don't they sometimes want to, and don't they do it?" "Yes, often, in privacy." There was another great laugh, and many said, "Don't they know that God sees them naked?" "Certainly." "And they don't heed him. It must be a dirty-minded animal that will be naked in God's presence and ashamed to be naked in the presence of his own kind."
Said the duck to the kangaroo, "Good gracious, how you hop! Over the fields and the water too, as if you never would stop. My life is a bore in this nasty pond, and I long to go out in the world beyond. I wish I could hop like you," said the duck to the kangaroo. "Please give me a ride on your back," said the duck to the kangaroo. "I would sit quite still and say nothing but quack the whole of the long day through. And we go to the Dee and the Jelly Bow Lee, over the land and over the sea. Please take me a ride, oh do," said the duck to the kangaroo. Said the kangaroo to the duck,
"This requires some little reflection. Perhaps on the whole it might bring me luck. And there seems but one objection, which is, if you'll let me speak so bold, your feet are unpleasantly wet and cold, and would probably give me the rheumatiz,"
said the kangaroo. Said the duck, "As I sat on the rocks, I have thought over that completely, and I bought 4 pairs of worsted socks which fit my web feet neatly. And to keep out the cold, I've bought a cloak, and every day a cigar I'll smoke, all to follow my own dear true love of a kangaroo." Said the kangaroo,
"I'm ready, all in the moonlight pale. But to balance me well, dear duck, sit steady, and quite at the end of my tail."
So away they went with a hop and a bound, and they hopped the whole world 3 times round. And who so happy, oh who, as the duck and the kangaroo?
Kenneth Grahame's Wind in the Willows, published in 1908, is one of the most famous and best-loved examples of animals in human guise. Several generations of children have now enjoyed the antics of Ratty, Mole, Badger, and of course the feckless Toad. In this extract, Toad faces his own version of lockdown, as his obsession with motor cars is now completely out of control.
It was a bright morning in the early part of summer. The mole and the water rat were just finishing breakfast in their little parlour and eagerly discussing their plans for the day when a heavy knock sounded at the door.
"Oh, bother. See who it is, Mole, like a good chap, since you've finished."
"Right, Ratty. Oh, my goodness! Mr. Badger!"
This was a wonderful thing indeed, that the badger should pay a formal call on them, or indeed on anybody. The badger strode heavily into the room and stood looking at the 2 animals with an expression full of seriousness.
"The hour has come."
What hour?"
"Whose hour, you should rather say. Why, Toad's hour. The hour of Toad. I said I would take him in hand when the winter was well over. And I'm going to take him in hand today.
Toad's Hour! Of course! Hooray! I remember now. Now we'll teach him to be a sensible toad.
I've heard from a trustworthy source that this very morning another new and exceptionally powerful motor car will arrive at Toad Hall on approval or return. Or perhaps at this very moment, Toad is busily dressing himself up in those singularly hideous clothes so dear to him, transforming himself from a comparatively good-looking toad into a creature which would give any decent-minded animal a violent fit. We must be up and doing ere it's too late. You two animals will accompany me instantly to Toad Hall, and the work of rescue shall begin.
Right you are. We'll rescue the poor unhappy animal. We'll convert him. He'll be the most converted toad that ever was before we've done with him.
They set off up the road on their mission of mercy, Badger leading the way. They reached the carriage drive of Toad Hall, and just as the Badger had anticipated, saw a shiny new motor car, painted a bright red, Toad's favourite colour. As they neared the door of Toad Hall, it flew open, and Mr. Toad, arrayed in goggles, cap, gaiters, and enormous overcoat, came swaggering down the steps, drawing on his gauntleted gloves.
Hello! Come on, you fellows. You're just in time to come with me for a jolly... jolly? I say, what's the matter?
Well, Ratty, take him inside.
Oh, I say, not so rough, you fellows.
You there, chauffeur. I'm afraid you won't be wanted today. Mr. Toad has changed his mind. He will not require the car. Please understand that this is final. You needn't wait.
They had to lay Toad out on the floor before they could get to work properly. Then the rat sat on him, and the mole got his motor clothes off him bit by bit. A good deal of his blustering spirit evaporated with the removal of his fine panoply. Now that he was merely Toad, and no longer the terror of the highway, he giggled feebly, seeming to quite understand the situation.
You knew it must come to this sooner or later, Toad. You've disregarded all the warnings we've given you. You've gone on squandering all the money your father left you, and you're getting us animals a bad name in the district by your furious driving, your smashes, and your rows with the police. Now, you're a good fellow in many respects, and I don't want to be too hard on you. I'll make one more effort to bring you to reason. You will come with me into the smoking room, and there you will hear some facts about yourself, and we'll see whether you come out of that room the same Toad as you went in.
Oh, that's no good. Talking to the toad will never cure him. He'll say anything.
Badger took Toad firmly by the arm, led him into the smoking room, and closed the door behind them. Through the closed door, Mole and Ratty could just hear Badger's voice, and after a while this was punctuated by long, drawn-out sobs proceeding from the bosom of Toad. After some 3/4 of an hour, the door opened, and the Badger reappeared, solemnly leading by the paw a very limp and dejected Toad.
Sit down there, Toad. Now, my friends, I'm pleased to inform you that Toad has at last seen the error of his ways. He's truly sorry for his misguided conduct in the past, and he's undertaken to give up motor cars entirely and forever. I have his solemn promise to that effect.
That is very good news.
Very good news indeed, if only. If only.
Ratty was looking very hard at Toad as he said this, and could not help thinking he perceived something vaguely resembling a twinkle in that animal's still sorrowful eye.
There's only one thing more to be done. Toad, I want you solemnly to repeat before your friends here what you fully admitted to me in the smoking room just now. First, you're sorry for what you've done, and you see the folly of it all.
There was a long, long pause. Toad looked desperately this way and that, while the other animals waited in grave silence. At last he spoke.
No, I'm not sorry. And it wasn't folly at all. It was simply glorious.
What? You backsliding animal. Didn't you tell me in there just now?
Oh, yes, in there. I'd have said anything in there. You're so eloquent, dear Badger, and so moving and so convincing, and put all your points so frightfully well. You can do what you like with me in there, and you know it. But I've been searching my mind since and going over things in it, and I find that I'm not a bit sorry or repentant, really. So it's no earthly good saying I am now, is it?
Then you don't promise never to touch a motor car again?
Certainly not. On the contrary, I faithfully promise that the very first motor car I see, boop, boop, off I go in it.
There, I knew he couldn't be trusted.
Very well, then. Since you won't yield to persuasion, we'll see what force can do. I thought it would come to this all along. You've often asked us three to come and stay with you, Toad, in this handsome house of yours. Well, now we're going to. When we've converted you to a proper point of view, we may quit, but not before. Take him upstairs, you two, and lock him in his bedroom while we arrange matters between ourselves.
Get off me, you fellows!
It's for your own good, Toady, you know. Think what fun we shall all have together, just as we used to, when you've quite got over this painful attack of yours.
Take great care of everything for you till you're well, Toad, and we'll see your money isn't wasted, as it has been.
No more of those regrettable incidents with the police, Toad.
And no more weeks in hospital being ordered about by female nurses, Toad.
Let me out! Let me out, you rotters! Let me out!
Oh, it's going to be a tedious business. I've never seen Toad so determined. However, we will see it out. He must never be left an instant unguarded. We shall have to take it in turns to be with him till the poison has worked itself out of his system.
But as time passed, these painful episodes grew less frequent. But though his friends tried to divert his mind into fresh channels, Toad grew apparently languid and depressed. One fine morning, the rat, whose turn it was to go on duty, went upstairs to relieve Badger.
Oh, Toad's still in bed. Can't get much out of him, except, oh, leave me alone. I'll be better presently. It may pass off in time. Don't be unduly anxious, and so on. Now, you look out, Rat. When Toad's quiet and submissive, then he's at his most artful. There's sure to be something up. I know him. I must take my leave now. I'll see you later.
Well, Toad, how are you today, old chap?
Thank you so much, dear Ratty. So good of you to inquire. But first tell me how you are yourself and the excellent Mole.
We're all right. Mole is going out for a run round with Badger, and they'll be out till luncheon time. So you and I will spend a pleasant morning together, and I'll do my best to amuse you. Now jump up, there's a good fella, and don't lie moping there on a fine morning like this.
Dear, kind Rat, how little you realise my condition, and how very far I am from jumping up now, if ever. But do not trouble about me. I hate being a burden to my friends, and I do not expect to be one much longer. Indeed, I almost hope not.
Well, I hope not too. You've been a fine bother to us all this time, and I'm glad to hear it's going to stop. And in weather like this, and the boating season just beginning, it's too bad of you, Toad. It isn't the trouble we mind, but you're making us miss such an awful lot.
I'm afraid it is the trouble you mind. I can quite understand it. It's natural enough. You're tired of bothering about me. I mustn't ask you to do anything further. I'm a nuisance, I know.
You are indeed. But I tell you, I'd take any trouble on earth for you if you'd only be a sensible animal.
If I thought that, Ratty, then I would beg you, for the last time, probably, to fetch the doctor. But don't you bother. It's only a trouble, and perhaps we may as well let things take their course.
Why? What do you want a doctor for?
Surely you have noticed of late. But no, why should you? Noticing things is only a trouble. Tomorrow. Indeed, you may be saying to yourself, oh, if only I had noticed sooner, if only I had done something. But no, it's a trouble. Never mind, forget that I ever asked.
Look here, old man. Of course I'll fetch a doctor to you if you really think you want him. But you can hardly be bad enough for that yet. Let's talk about something else.
I fear, dear friends, that talk can do little in a case like this, or doctors either, for that matter. Still, one must grasp at the slightest straw. And by the way, I hate to give you additional trouble, but would you mind at the same time asking the lawyer to step up? It would be a convenience to me, and there are times when one must face disagreeable tasks, no matter how exhausted one is.
Rat hurried from the room, and though he did not forget to lock the door behind him, he was now seriously alarmed.
A lawyer? Oh, he must be really bad. Oh, what shall I do? Oh, I wish Mole and Badger were here. Best be on the safe side. And if there's nothing really the matter, the doctor will tell him he's an old ass and cheer him up. I'll better humour him and go. It won't take very long.
So Rat ran off to the village on his errand of mercy. The Toad, who had hopped lightly out of bed as soon as he had heard the key turn in the lock, watched the Rat eagerly from the window till he disappeared down the carriage drive. Then, laughing heartily, he dressed as quickly as possible, filled his pockets with cash from a small drawer in the dressing table, knotted together the sheets from his bed, and used them to make his escape through the window. Then he headed off in the opposite direction to the Rat.
Smart piece of work, that. Brain against brute force, and Brain came out on the top. Poor old Ratty. Won't he catch it when the Badger gets back? A worthy fellow, Ratty, with many good qualities, but very little intelligence and absolutely no education. I must take him in hand one day and see if I can make something of him.
Eventually, Toad happened upon an inn, where he stopped to rest and have some lunch. He was about halfway through his meal when he heard an all too familiar sound. The poop-poop drew nearer and nearer, and Toad looked out of the window to see a car turn into the inn yard and come to a stop. Presently the owner entered the coffee room, and then Toad seized his chance. He slipped out of the room, quietly paid his bill at the bar, and as soon as he got outside, sauntered round quietly to the inn yard.
There cannot be any harm in my only just looking at it. I wonder if this sort of car starts easily.
The car stood in the middle of the yard, quite unattended. The next moment, the old passion overcame Toad. As if in a dream, he found himself seated in the driver's seat. He pulled the lever and swung the car round the yard and out through the archway. All sense of right and wrong, all fear of obvious consequences were suspended as the car devoured the street and leapt forth on the high road through the open country. He was only conscious that he was Toad once more, Toad at his best and highest, fulfilling his instincts, living his hour, reckless of what might come to him.
And now, two contrasting depictions of fantasy creatures. Edward Lear was the master of the nonsense poem, which gave full rein to his imagination. The poor, lonely Quangle Wangle manages to attract all sorts of new animal friends, thanks to his unusual headgear. Lewis Carroll was another master of creative and fantastical beasts and language. From Alice Through the Looking Glass, Alice finds a book written in a seemingly unintelligible language. Realizing that she is travelling through an inverted world, she recognizes the verses on the pages are written in mirror writing. She holds a mirror to one of the poems and reads the reflective verse of Jabberwocky. She finds the nonsense verse as puzzling as the odd land she has passed into, later revealed as a dreamscape.
On the top of the crumpety tree, the Quangle Wangle sat. But his face you could not see on account of his beaver hat. For his hat was 102 feet wide, with ribbons and bibbons on every side, and bells and buttons, and loops and lace, so that nobody ever could see the face of the Quangle Wangle Quee. The Quangle Wangle said to himself on the crumpety tree, "Jam and jelly and bread are the best of food for me. But the longer I live on this crumpety tree, the plainer than ever it seems to me that very few people come this way, and that life on the whole is far from gay," said the Quangle Wangle Quee. But there came to the crumpety tree Mr. and Mrs. Canary, and they said, "Did you ever see any spot so charmingly airy? May we build a nest on your lovely hat? Mr. Quangle Wangle, grant us that. Oh, please let us come and build a nest of whatever material suits you best, Mr. Quangle Wangle Quee." And besides, to the crumpety tree came the stork, the duck, and the owl, the snail and the bumblebee, the frog and the thimble fowl with the corkscrew leg. And all of them said, "We humbly beg we may build our homes on your lovely hat. Mr. Quangle Wangle, grant us that, Mr. Quangle Wangle Quee." And the golden grouse came there, and the pobble, who has no toes, and the small Olympian bear, and the dong with the luminous nose, and the blue baboon who played the flute, and the orient calf from the land of Jute, and the attery squash, and the bisky bat, all came and built on the lovely hat of the Quangle Wangle Quee. And the Quangle Wangle said to himself on the crumpety tree, "When all these creatures move, what a wonderful noise there'll be!" And at night, by the light of the mulberry moon, they danced to the flute of the blue baboon on the broad green leaves of the crumpety tree, and all were as happy could be with the Quangle Wangle Quee.
"'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the bur groves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jub-Jub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the Manx-gnome foe he sought. So rested he by the Tum-Tum tree, and stood a while in thought, and as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumping back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Oh, come to my arms, my beamish boy, oh, frabjous day, callooh, callay. He chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. O mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raps outgrabe.
And now we come to the final part of our journey, back to reality and our own backyard. The poet John Clare was a resident of Dr. Matthew Allen's High Beach Asylum from July 1837 until July 1841, when he absconded. Clare saw his escape from the asylum as a return to freedom, to love and home. He walked for 3.5 days, 20th to 24th of July 1841, from High Beach to Northborough and Helpston. His love of the natural world is reflected in his poem A Walk in the Forest. Bucket's Hill was the local name for Buckhurst Hill. Campbell, an inmate, was the son of the poet Thomas Campbell.
I love the forest and its airy bounds, where friendly Campbell takes his daily rounds. I love the breakneck hills that headlong go, and leave me high and half the world below. I love to see the beech hill mounting high, the brook without a bridge and nearly dry. There's Bucket's Hill, a place of firs and clouds, which evening in a golden blaze enshrouds. I hear the cows go home with tinkling bell, and see the woodman in the forest dwell, whose dog runs eager where the rabbit's gone. He eats the grass, then kicks and hurries on, then scrapes for hoarded bone and tries to play, and barks at larger dogs and runs away.